My name is Cassandra Mitchell, and I'm 34 years old. Today I buried my mother while my family stood around her grave pretending they cared. The same family who abandoned her on her deathbed, leaving me to hold her hand as she took her final breath. After the service, a gray-haired lawyer handed me an envelope. "From your mother," he said quietly. "To be opened after her passing." What I found in that letter would not only change everything I thought I knew about my family, but would set me on a path of revenge I never thought myself capable of. Before I dive into what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for what's right, even when it felt impossible. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this family drama explodes into something no one saw coming. I've always been the odd one out in my family. While they chased wealth and status, I pursued meaning. After graduating from Boston University, I built a respectable career in marketing. My apartment isn't fancy, but it's mine, earned without my father's connections or money. I'm proud of that, even if my family never was. My father, Warren Mitchell, is what people politely call old money with new ambitions. His investment firm manages portfolios worth hundreds of millions. My stepmother, Patricia, 20 years his junior, spends her days between charity luncheons and cosmetic surgery consultations. My half-brothers, Jason and Kyle, were handed executive positions at my father's company straight out of college, despite their mediocre grades and questionable work ethic. Then there was my mother, Elizabeth. She was different. She taught literature at a community college and volunteered teaching English to immigrants on weekends. When my parents divorced 20 years ago, everyone assumed she'd take the settlement money and live comfortably. Instead, she refused anything beyond child support, saying she wouldn't be bought off. We lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment while my father moved into a mansion with his new wife. I was 14 when it happened. Despite the judge granting shared custody, I chose to live primarily with my mother. My father never forgave her for that. Or me, really. Each time I'd visit his new home for the mandatory weekend, Patricia would make subtle comments about our humble circumstances and how much better off I'd be if I lived with them. My half-brothers, still in elementary school then, were taught to view my mother as beneath them. As the years passed, the family distanced themselves further. My graduation, my first job, my promotion. My father and his new family sent cards or impersonal gifts, but were always too busy to attend. My mother never complained, never spoke ill of them, just showed up with her unwavering support and genuine pride. 6 months ago, Mom was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim from the start. When I called my father to inform him, his response was methodical. "I'll have my assistant send flowers and make a donation to the cancer center of your choice." As if writing a check could absolve him of his human responsibility. In the beginning, Patricia made a show of caring, stopping by the hospital once with an expensive gift basket and photographer from the charity she chaired. The Mitchell family supporting cancer research appeared in the society pages the following week. My half-brothers texted occasionally asking for updates but never visiting. As Mom declined, I took a leave of absence from work to care for her. The bills mounted, but I managed. During her final week, I called everyone. The conversations still replay in my mind like haunting echoes. "Dad, the doctors say she doesn't have much time. Would you come say goodbye?" His response was ice cold. "I have investors flying in from Tokyo. Send my regards." Patricia was even worse. "Darling, we're leaving for our Maldives trip tomorrow." Such terrible timing, but the reservations were made months ago. I'm sure she understands. Jason claimed he was closing a major deal. Kyle at least sounded genuinely conflicted before saying he couldn't get away from a project deadline. In the end, it was just me sitting beside her hospital bed holding her increasingly frail hand. The beeping machines and antiseptic smell are forever burned into my memory. Her final words were barely audible. "The truth will set you free, Cassie. Remember, I love you more than anything in this world." She slipped away at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was alone when I signed the death certificate. Alone when I cleaned out her apartment. Alone when I selected her casket. The funeral was a different story. Suddenly, the family materialized, dressed in designer black, performing grief with Oscar-worthy precision. My father stood stoically at the graveside, one arm around Patricia, who dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Jason and Kyle flanked them, checking their phones when they thought no one was looking. The reception afterward was held at my father's estate, his insistence. "It's what's expected," he'd said, not meeting my eyes. I watched as they worked the room of Mom's friends and colleagues, accepting condolences as if they'd been by her side through her illness, instead of islands away on a luxury vacation. It was at this macabre theater performance that Mr. Daniels, a lawyer I'd never met, approached me in a quiet corner. "Miss Mitchell, I was your mother's attorney." His voice was low, respectful. "She left this with explicit instructions it be delivered to you upon her death." He handed me a sealed envelope. Not before. I clutched it, feeling the weight of whatever secrets it contained. "Did she tell you what's in here?" He adjusted his glasses. "No. But she said when the time came, you'd know exactly what to do with it." That night I sat alone in my apartment, the sounds of the city a distant hum beyond my windows. I'd changed from my funeral clothes into sweatpants and one of Mom's old cardigans that still smelled faintly of her perfume. The envelope, Mr. Daniels, had given me lay on my coffee table, my name, written in Mom's elegant handwriting. For nearly an hour I just stared at it, afraid of what truths it might contain. Finally, with trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded several pages of my mother's handwriting. "My dearest Cassandra," it began. "If you're reading this, I've finally lost my battle. Please know that having you as my daughter has been the greatest joy of my life. Your kindness, your strength, your unwavering moral compass, these are the qualities I'm most proud to have seen grow in you." Tears blurred my vision. I wiped them away and continued reading. "There are truths I've protected you from believing it was for the best. Now I realize that secrets, even well-intentioned ones, can be their own kind of poison. It's time you knew everything." What followed shattered the foundations of everything I believed about our family history. "Your father didn't leave me for Patricia as you've always believed. I asked for the divorce after discovering financial records that showed he was embezzling millions from his investors and the company. He had created elaborate shell companies to hide the money." I gasped, rereading the paragraph to make sure I understood. My mother continued. "When I confronted him, Warren didn't deny it. Instead, he threatened me. If I exposed him or sought a fair divorce settlement, he would use his connections to gain full custody of you and ensure I never saw you again. In 2004, with his family's influence and wealth, he could have succeeded." My hands were shaking so badly I had to put the letter down for a moment. I remembered that year, the hushed arguments I'd overheard, my mother's inexplicable sadness, my father's sudden business trips. It all started making terrible sense. I made a choice then, Cassandra. I chose you. I agreed to his terms, a quiet divorce, minimal support, and most importantly, my silence about his crimes. In exchange, I got what mattered most: the chance to raise you to be your mother. I would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the sacrifice she had made, the injustice she had endured, all to protect me. Over the years, I gathered evidence: bank statements, transfer records, emails. I couldn't come forward without risking our relationship, but I couldn't let go of the truth either. Everything is in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, downtown box number 1847. The key is taped to the back of the photograph of us at Cape Cod, the one on my bedside table. The access code is your birthday. I immediately went to the box of my mother's personal effects I'd brought home and found the photograph. Sure enough, a small key was taped to the back. I don't tell you this seeking revenge, my darling. Bitterness is a poison I refuse to drink. I tell you because the truth matters. Justice matters. What your father did hurt real people. Retirees, hard-working families, people who trusted him with their futures. And his behavior since, the way he and his new family have treated you, reveals the moral bankruptcy behind the wealth. The letter continued, detailing specific instances. She had documented names of people who might corroborate her story if approached carefully. With each paragraph, my grief transformed into something else, a cold, clarifying rage. Whatever you decide to do with this information is your choice. You may choose to leave it buried, to move forward with your life unburdened by the past. I would understand that completely. But I know your heart, Cassandra. You've never been able to witness injustice without trying to right it. If you choose that path, be careful. Warren has powerful friends and no moral boundaries when threatened. The letter ended with words that would become my North Star in the months ahead. Remember that the goal isn't revenge but truth. Not punishment but justice. I love you infinitely across whatever divide now separates us. Find your way to peace however that journey unfolds. Always, Mom. I sat motionless for a long time after finishing the letter, my mind reeling with implications. The family portrait I'd carried in my head was a lie. My father wasn't merely neglectful and cold. He was potentially criminal. My mother hadn't been a passive victim of abandonment. She'd been silenced through coercion and threats. That night, I transformed my spare bedroom into an investigation center. I pinned timeline notes to the wall, created files on my laptop, researched white-collar crime statutes. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother in that hospital bed dying with her secrets. By morning, I had learned that Mitchell Financial Group was now worth over $50 million. My half-brothers held executive vice president positions despite Jason's repeated DUI incidents and Kyle's business school's C average. My stepmother, Patricia, sat on the board and chaired the company's foundation, which seemed to host more galas than it distributed grants. The family that couldn't be bothered to say goodbye to my dying mother was thriving on what might be stolen money. The injustice of it burned like acid in my chest. I made a vow that morning as the sun rose over Boston. I would uncover the full truth, whatever it took. I would bring it into the light. I would make them face what they'd done, not just to my mother, but to everyone they'd hurt. For the first time since my mother's diagnosis, I felt something other than grief. I felt purpose. Strategy would be essential. After 2 days of planning, I decided my first move would be reconnecting with the family under the guise of seeking comfort in my grief. The idea of breaking bread with them turned my stomach, but it would provide access I'd need. Before approaching my father directly, I reached out to his executive assistant, Melissa Grant. She'd been with the company for over 15 years and had known me since I was a teenager. More importantly, she'd been friendly with my mother before the divorce, often sending birthday cards and Christmas greetings years after they'd supposedly lost touch. We met at a quiet cafe 3 blocks from the Mitchell Financial offices. Melissa arrived precisely on time, dressed in a conservative navy suit, her auburn hair pulled back in a neat bun. She hugged me tightly. "Cassandra, I'm so sorry about Elizabeth. She was a wonderful woman." Her eyes seemed genuinely sad. "I wanted to attend the funeral, but," she trailed off. "But Dad wouldn't have approved I finished for her." She didn't deny it, just stirred her coffee uncomfortably. "How are you holding up?" "Some days are harder than others," I said, not having to fake the emotion in my voice. "That's actually why I wanted to talk. Mom's passing has made me realize life is too short for estrangement. I'm thinking of trying to reconnect with Dad and the family." Melissa's eyes widened slightly. "That would be nice. Your father doesn't talk about it, but I think he regrets how things have been between you." I doubted that, sincerely, but nodded. "I just don't know how to approach him. He's always so busy, and we haven't had a real conversation in years." "He is particularly busy right now." Melissa leaned forward, lowering her voice. "There's a major company transition happening. Very hush-hush." "Transition. Is he retiring?" I asked, trying to sound merely curious. Melissa glanced around the cafe. "I shouldn't say anything, but since you're family, he's in talks to sell the company. A Singapore-based investment group is doing due diligence now." My pulse quickened. If my father was planning to sell, it might explain the urgency to visit offshore locations my mother had mentioned in her letter. He could be preparing to move assets. That's a big change. How are Jason and Kyle taking it? "Jason's on board. He stands to make millions without having to work. Kyle seems more conflicted. Melissa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. Your father's looking for the Henderson portfolio. I should head back. Before you go, I said quickly, do you think you could help me find a time to see him? Maybe get on his calendar sometime next week. She hesitated. I could, but it might be better coming from you first. An email, maybe? Of course, I smiled. But in the meantime, any insight into his schedule would help. I don't want to reach out when he's swamped or traveling. After another moment of hesitation, Melissa pulled out her tablet. Well, he's flying to Cayman Islands this Friday for the weekend. Next week, he has board meetings Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday might be good. He only has a lunch with Congressman Winters. By the time we parted, Melissa had shared not only my father's schedule for the next 2 weeks, but also mentioned the names of several key players in the acquisition talks. She'd also unwittingly confirmed that my father had accounts in the Caymans, exactly where my mother's letter suggested he was hiding money. I'm so glad we reconnected, Cassandra, she said as we hugged goodbye. Your mother would be happy to see you rebuilding these bridges. I think so too, I replied, feeling a twinge of guilt for manipulating her kindness. Would it be okay if I called you again? Maybe you could help me understand what Dad's interested in these days. It's been so long I'm afraid of saying all the wrong things when we meet. Of course, she said warmly. Anything to help. Over the next week, Melissa became an unwitting fountain of information. She sent me my father's preferred Scotch brand for a peace offering, mentioned his recent interest in buying a yacht, even forwarded me the family's summer travel plans to Martha's Vineyard. Most valuably, she granted me remote access to his calendar just to help coordinate a good meeting time. Access that showed me every appointment, including those with his lawyers and offshore banking representatives. I was carefully documenting a pattern of suspicious meetings when my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. With a deep breath, I answered. Cassandra. His voice was exactly as I remembered. Deep, authoritative, emotionless. I understand you've been pumping Melissa for information about me. My blood ran cold. Dad, I've just been trying to find a good time to see you. After Mom's funeral, I've been thinking. Let me be very clear, he cut me off. I don't know what you're playing at, but it stops now. Melissa works for me, not you. I wasn't playing at anything, I protested, scrambling to salvage the situation. I just wanted to reconnect. If that were true, you'd have called me directly. His voice lowered. Your mother always had a tendency to imagine conspiracies where there were none. I'd hate to see you inherit that particular trait. The thinly veiled threat wasn't lost on me. I'm nothing like Mom, right? Isn't that what you always said? A cold chuckle. We'll see. Goodbye, Cassandra. The line went dead. Within minutes, my access to his calendar was revoked. By evening, Melissa called, her voice tight with anxiety. I can't believe you used me like that, she hissed. Mr. Mitchell knows everything, that I showed you his schedule, that we discussed the acquisition. Do you have any idea how much trouble I'm in? Melissa, I'm sorry, I was just trying to save it. Your father vouched for me, told the board I was manipulated by his grieving daughter. He saved my job, Cassandra. 20 years I've worked for him. He's been nothing but good to me while you used our history to pump me for information. He embezzled millions, I blurted out. He threatened my mother, forced her into silence. He's not who you think. Your mother was a wonderful woman who let bitterness cloud her judgment after the divorce, Melissa said firmly. Warren Mitchell has integrity. He gave me a chance when no one else would paid for my mother's medical care when she had no insurance. Whatever you think he did, you're wrong. The call ended with Melissa telling me never to contact her again. My first attempt at gathering intelligence had backfired spectacularly. Worse, I'd tipped my hand to my father. He now knew I was asking questions, digging into his affairs. That night, I nearly gave up. The task seemed impossible. My father too powerful, too protected by loyal employees and family. I sat on my couch, staring at my investigation board, feeling utterly defeated. As I was about to take it all down, my eyes fell on a small jewelry box of my mother's I'd brought home. I hadn't looked through it yet, the thought too painful. But something compelled me to open it now. Inside, nestled among modest costume pieces, was a small folded note in my mother's handwriting. It read simply, "When the path seems darkest, remember your own strength. Some truths demand to be heard no matter how powerful those who would silence them." I traced her words with my fingertip, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. My approach had been flawed, too direct. I needed to be smarter, more strategic. The next morning, I formulated a new plan. If I couldn't gather information from employees, I'd go straight to the source, my family. It was time to accept my father's standing invitation to Sunday dinner at the mansion. Time to play the role of grieving daughter, seeking family comfort. Time to enter the lion's den. The Mitchell estate sat on 3 manicured acres in Brookline, a stone's throw from the country club where my father held court on weekends. The main house was a colonial revival monstrosity. 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, and a 3-car garage housing my father's collection of vintage automobiles. I'd last visited 5 years earlier for a strained Christmas dinner that ended with my mother being subtly insulted by Patricia and me leaving before dessert. Now I stood at the imposing front door, dressed in a conservative black dress, clutching a bottle of my father's favorite Scotch-information, courtesy of the now hostile Melissa. I'd brought along my friend Rachel as moral support. "Remember," she whispered as we waited, "you're just a daughter seeking family comfort after your mom's death. Nothing more." Patricia opened the door herself, a practiced smile fixed on her surgically enhanced face. At 52, she looked 40, thanks to the ministrations of Boston's finest cosmetic surgeons. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her cream silk blouse probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Cassandra, darling?" She air-kissed my cheek. "And you brought a friend, how unexpected." "This is Rachel," I said. "I hope it's okay. I mentioned I was coming here tonight and she offered to drive since I'm still a bit emotional." "Cassandra, darling?" She air-kissed my cheek. "And you brought a friend, how unexpected." Patricia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, we have plenty of food. Come in, everyone's in the living room." My father stood by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch already in hand. At 61, Warren Mitchell remained imposing. Tall, silver-haired, with the lean build of someone who paid a personal trainer handsomely. His navy blazer and crisp white shirt screamed old money, as did his posture, straight-backed and slightly imperious. "Cassandra," he said, voice neutral, "I see you brought company." "Rachel's an old friend," I explained. "She's been supporting me since Mom's passing." Something flickered in his eyes at the mention of my mother. Not grief, not guilt, calculation, as if measuring how best to respond. "Yes, well, Elizabeth's illness was certainly challenging for you." "Drink!" He gestured to the bar cart without waiting for my answer. My half-brothers entered from the terrace, both tanned from what I assumed was their recent Maldives trip. Jason, 33, and divorced twice, had our father's height but none of his restraint. His playboy lifestyle regularly made the local gossip columns. Kyle, 31, and perpetually in Jason's shadow, had always struck me as less comfortable with the family wealth, though not uncomfortable enough to refuse its benefits. "The prodigal sister returns," Jason smirked, helping himself to a generous pour of scotch. "Dad said you've been making waves." "Just trying to reconnect," I replied evenly. Losing Mom made me realize family is important. "Speaking of making waves," Kyle interjected, eyeing Rachel with interest, "aren't you going to introduce your friend?" Rachel, to her credit, played her role perfectly. Friendly but slightly reserved, asking appropriate questions about the family business, complimenting Patricia on the house. Throughout drinks and into dinner, she kept Kyle distracted with harmless flirtation while I observed the family dynamics. Patricia dominated conversation with stories of their recent vacation and upcoming charity gala. My father watched everything with calculated detachment, occasionally checking his phone. Jason drank too much and made increasingly inappropriate comments about Rachel, which she deflected with practiced ease. "So, Cassandra," Patricia said over the main course, "how is that little marketing job of yours still at the same company?" 5 years now, I replied. I was recently promoted to Director of Client Strategy. How nice, she said dismissively. Though I've always thought you could have done so much more if you'd accepted your father's help. A Harvard MBA would have opened proper doors. Some of us prefer to earn our positions, I said, forcing a smile. Jason snorted. And some of us aren't idiots who turn down golden opportunities out of stubbornness. That's enough, my father said mildly. Cassandra made her choices. Speaking of careers, I redirected how are things at Mitchell Financial. Melissa mentioned something about acquisition talks before we lost touch. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father's eyes narrowed slightly. Melissa should focus on her administrative duties rather than gossiping, he said coldly. But yes, we're exploring strategic options. Nothing definitive. That's not what I heard, Jason said, his fourth scotch, evidently loosening his tongue. The Singapore deal is practically done. Just waiting on the final valuation. Jason. My father's voice held a warning. What, she's family. Jason waved dismissively. Besides, once the deal closes, we all make bank. Even you, sis, if you'd stop being so holier-than-thou about the family money. I kept my expression neutral despite the surge of adrenaline. This confirmed what Melissa had shared and suggested the timeline was accelerating. I think it's wonderful, Patricia interjected smoothly. Warren deserves to enjoy the fruits of his labor after building the company from nothing. The yacht we're looking at in Monaco is absolutely divine. I kept my expression neutral despite the surge of adrenaline. This confirmed what Melissa had shared and suggested the timeline was accelerating. What, she's family. Jason waved dismissively. Besides, once the deal closes, we all make bank. Even you, sis, if you'd stop being so holier-than-thou about the family money. During dessert, I excused myself to use the restroom, taking a deliberate wrong turn toward my father's home office. The door was locked, a new development since my last visit. More telling was the keypad beside it, suggesting whatever lay inside needed additional security. Just turned right instead of left, I said, trying to look embarrassed. The house is bigger than I remembered. I nodded and moved past him, heart pounding. He waited until I was several steps away before adding, "Oh, and Cassandra, my office is private, family or not." When I returned to the dining room, the conversation had shifted to summer plans. I waited for an appropriate moment before asking to see old family photos, claiming Mom's death had made me nostalgic. "What a lovely idea," Patricia said with transparently false enthusiasm. "Kyle, why don't you show Cassandra the albums in the library while I organize coffee?" In the wood-paneled library, Kyle pulled out several leather-bound albums. "Most of these are from after Dad remarried," he said awkwardly. "I don't think there are many with your mom." "That's okay," I said, flipping through pages of vacations, parties, and celebrations I hadn't been part of. "It's nice to see what I missed." Kyle shifted uncomfortably. "Look about what Jason said and what happened with Melissa." Dad was pretty pissed. I gathered that he thinks you're up to something. Kyle lowered his voice. "Are you—" I met his eyes. "I'm trying to process my mother's death and the fact that none of her family, including her former husband and stepsons, could be bothered to say goodbye. How would you feel?" A flash of genuine shame crossed his face. "I wanted to visit her in the hospital. Patricia said it would just be awkward for everyone. And you always do what Patricia says." He flinched. "That's not fair. Neither is letting someone die alone," I countered, then softened my tone. "But I didn't come here to fight. I really am trying to process everything." Kyle seemed about to say more when we heard footsteps. Patricia appeared in the doorway. "Coffee's served on the terrace. Your friend Rachel is quite charming, Cassandra. Though perhaps a bit friendly with my son. Rachel's naturally warm with everyone," I said, closing the album. "No need to worry about her intentions." Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I never worry about intentions, dear. I observe actions." The message was clear. She was watching me closely. As Rachel and I prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside in the foyer. "Sunday dinners are at 7, should you wish to continue this family reconnection. His tone made it clear he didn't believe my motives for a second. I nodded anyway. Thank you for having us. And Cassandra, he added, his voice dropping whatever Elizabeth may have told you in her final days, remember that the terminally ill often become confused, mixing facts with fantasies. The thinly veiled warning sent ice through my veins. Mom was lucid until the end, as you say. His smile was shark-like. Drive safely. Kyle seemed about to say more when we heard footsteps. Patricia appeared in the doorway. Coffee's served on the terrace. Your friend Rachel is quite charming, Cassandra. Though perhaps a bit friendly with my son. The thinly veiled warning sent ice through my veins. Mom was lucid until the end. In the car, Rachel exhaled dramatically. Your family is intense. Your stepmom asked me about my background, like she was conducting a security clearance. I nodded, processing this. They're definitely accelerating whatever they're planning. Dad's office has new security, keypad access only. Did you see the way they reacted when you mentioned your mom total freeze out? I gripped the steering wheel tighter. They're hiding something big. Dad all but admitted it with his warning about Mom's confused state. So what's next? Rachel asked. Kyle mentioned the company's having liquidity issues despite the pending sale. And Jason, after his sixth drink, started complaining about offshore accounts being unnecessary complications now. I drove in silence for a while before adding, the worst part wasn't their coldness or their secrets. It was watching them mock Mom's memory over coffee. Patricia called her simple for choosing to teach. Jason joked about her pathetic little apartment. And I just sat there smiling, pretending it didn't cut like a knife. Rachel squeezed my arm. You did what you had to do. Your mom would understand. I hope so, I whispered. Because right now I feel like I'm drowning in their world and it's getting harder to remember who I am. The First National Bank of Boston was housed in a stately stone building downtown, its interior all polished marble and hushed efficiency. I provided ID, signed the register, and was escorted to a private room where my mother's safety deposit box awaited. With trembling hands, I inserted the key. Inside lay several manila envelopes, a USB drive, and a smaller, sealed envelope with my name on it. I began with the latter. I need to see what's in that safety deposit box, I replied. And I need help from someone who knows how the financial world really works. The name was vaguely familiar. After reviewing the other contents, bank statements, transaction records, and what appeared to be copies of offshore account documents, I searched for Robert Keegan online. What I found wasn't encouraging. Once a rising star in financial law, Keegan had been disbarred for alcohol abuse after a series of courtroom incidents. The last public mention of him was in a bar association notice 3 years ago. No current address or phone number was available. It took 4 days of searching, but I finally located him through a former legal secretary who'd kept in touch. Robert Keegan now worked as a part-time paralegal at a small law firm specializing in tenant rights. He lived in a rundown apartment building in Dorchester. I arrived at his door on a rainy Tuesday evening. The man who answered bore little resemblance to the sharp attorney from the professional photographs I'd seen. Robert Keegan at 57 was gaunt with 3 days of stubble and bloodshot eyes. He wore wrinkled khakis and a stained dress shirt. Whatever you're selling, not interested, he said, starting to close the door. I'm Elizabeth Mitchell's daughter, I said quickly. She told me to find you. He froze, then opened the door wider. Elizabeth sent you. When? She died 3 weeks ago. Cancer. She left me a letter saying you could help me. Keegan stared at me for a long moment before stepping aside. You'd better come in. His apartment was small and cluttered, but surprisingly clean. Law books lined the walls, and a desk in the corner was stacked with legal pads covered in neat handwriting. Elizabeth Mitchell, he said, shaking his head as he poured himself a glass of water. I noticed his hands trembling slightly. I haven't heard that name in years. She was a good woman. I'm sorry about her passing. She said you knew what my father did, that you almost exposed him. Keegan's expression darkened. Warren Mitchell. Now there's a name I've tried to forget. He gestured to a chair. What exactly did Elizabeth tell you? I explained about the letter, the safety deposit box, the evidence she'd gathered. As I spoke, Keegan seemed to transform subtly, his posture straightening, his eyes growing more focused. Your mother was right to reach out to me, he said when I finished. But I'm not sure I'm the help she imagined. As you can probably tell, I've had some challenges. What happened between you and my father? I asked directly. Keegan sighed deeply. 8 years ago, I was representing a client in a dispute with Mitchell Financial. During discovery, I found irregularities in their accounting, signs of money movement that didn't add up. I kept pulling threads and eventually uncovered evidence of systematic embezzlement. What did you do? What any ethical attorney would do, I prepared to present my findings to the SEC. His expression turned bitter. 2 days before my scheduled meeting, I was arrested for driving under the influence. Not my first offense, but the timing was suspicious. My father arranged it. I can't prove that. What I can tell you is that while I was dealing with the DUI, someone broke into my home office and took my case files. When I tried to recreate my work, my firm suddenly received a complaint from a former client alleging I'd advised them to commit tax fraud. It was completely fabricated, but it triggered an ethics investigation. He took another sip of water. By the time I was cleared of those charges, I'd lost my position at the firm. My drinking got worse. I missed court appearances, showed up impaired. Eventually, I was disbarred. He met my eyes directly. I can't prove your father orchestrated my downfall, but I know he did. I believed him. The pattern matched exactly what my mother had described. Threats, coercion, destruction of evidence. Can you still help me? The evidence my mother gathered, could it be enough to expose him? Keegan rubbed his face. Maybe. Let me see what you've got. For the next 3 hours, we pored over the documents. Keegan's legal mind, though rusty, was still sharp. He identified key transactions, explained complex financial maneuvers in terms I could understand, and pointed out the most damning evidence. Your mother was thorough, he said, genuine admiration in his voice. She documented a pattern spanning 15 years. The statute of limitations has expired on the earliest offenses, but the recent activity, especially these Cayman transfers, those are still prosecutable. So we can go to the authorities. He hesitated. It's not that simple. The SEC would need more than just these papers. We'd need corroborating testimony, access to the current company records. What if I could get those? I've been attending family dinners rebuilding trust. That's extremely dangerous, Keegan warned. If Warren suspects you're gathering evidence, he won't hesitate to destroy you. He's done it before. I have to try, I insisted. For my mother. For everyone he's hurt. Keegan studied me for a long moment. You have her courage. And her stubborn streak. He sighed. All right. I'll help you build a case. But we do this my way. Methodical, careful, with backup copies of everything. We agreed to meet again in 2 days. Keegan would review the evidence more thoroughly and outline what additional documentation we needed. When I arrived for our second meeting, Keegan wasn't there. I waited an hour before the building manager let me check his apartment. It was empty. Not just of Keegan, but of all the documents I'd shared with him. Panic rising, I called his work. They hadn't seen him in 2 days. His cell phone went straight to voicemail. It felt like the walls were closing in. Had my father somehow discovered our connection? Had Keegan simply taken the evidence and disappeared, perhaps, to blackmail my father himself? I spent 3 days searching for him, growing increasingly desperate. Finally, on the 4th day, I found him in a downtown bar nursing a whiskey at 3 in the afternoon. You disappeared, I accused, sliding into the booth across from him. With all my evidence. Keep your voice down, he muttered, looking around nervously. I didn't disappear. I got scared. What happened? 2 men came to my apartment the night after we met. Said they were old friends, but I'd never seen them before. They mentioned how sad it would be if something happened to my daughter in Seattle. His hand shook as he took another sip. I don't talk to Melissa much since the divorce, but she's all I have left. They knew where she worked, her address. My blood ran cold. My father sent them. Can't prove it, Keegan said, the phrase seemingly his mantra. But the timing wasn't coincidental. They took nothing, just delivered their message and left. He reached into his jacket and slid a USB drive across the table. I made digital copies of everything before they came. The originals are in a secure location. So you're still helping me, he grimaced. I spent the last 3 days drinking and hating myself for being a coward. Again, he met my eyes. Your mother stood up to Warren when I couldn't. I owe her this much. Relief flooded through me. What's our next step? We need more current evidence. And we need someone who can't be intimidated. Someone with a public platform. He leaned forward. There's a financial journalist, Diana Grant. She specializes in corporate fraud investigations. If anyone can help us navigate this safely and get the story out, it's her. Can we trust her? More than you can trust me, he said with bitter honesty. She's built her career on integrity. Warren can't buy or threaten her without creating exactly the kind of story she lives to break. As we parted, Keegan grabbed my arm. Be careful. Your father didn't become what he is by leaving loose ends. If he suspects what you're doing, he'll come after you worse than he did me. I know, I said, thinking of my mother's warning in her letter. Elizabeth was the bravest person I knew, Keegan said, a hint of his former professional demeanor returning. She'd be proud of you. As I watched him walk away, shoulders hunched against invisible weights, I wondered if I possessed even half my mother's courage. I would need every ounce of it for what lay ahead. After 2 more Sunday dinners at the Mitchell estate, I began to notice subtle differences in how my half-brothers responded to my presence. Jason remained dismissive and occasionally hostile, clearly viewing my return as a threat somehow. Kyle, however, seemed increasingly troubled. During the 3rd dinner, while Patricia was giving my father's philanthropic board colleagues a tour of the garden, I found Kyle alone in the library, staring into a glass of bourbon. Heavy thoughts, I asked, closing the door behind me. He startled slightly. Just business stuff. I took a seat opposite him. The acquisition not going smoothly. It's fine, he said, automatically, then sighed. Actually, it's a mess. The Singapore Group's due diligence team keeps finding irregularities they want explained. What kind of irregularities? Kyle hesitated, studying me. Why are you really here, Cassie? After years of minimal contact, you're suddenly interested in family dinners and company business. It was a critical moment. I could continue the pretense or take a calculated risk. Looking at Kyle, always the softer of my half-brothers, the one who'd occasionally sent birthday cards even during the estrangement, I chose the latter. I found something after Mom died, I said carefully. Documents suggesting Dad might have been involved in financial improprieties. I'm trying to understand what's true. Kyle's face paled. You shouldn't be talking about this. Especially not here. So there is something to talk about. He glanced nervously at the door. Meet me tomorrow. Brighton Coffee Shop on Newbury. Noon. The next day, Kyle arrived 20 minutes late, looking like he hadn't slept. He ordered black coffee and led us to the most isolated table. I've been reviewing the documents the Singapore Group flagged, he said without preamble. There are discrepancies in our reported assets versus actual holdings. Significant ones. Are you saying Dad's been cooking the books? I'm saying there are irregularities I can't explain. Kyle ran a hand through his hair. But Jason says it's just creative accounting and not to worry about it. And you believe him. I don't know what to believe anymore. He looked genuinely distressed. Dad's been acting strange since the acquisition talks started. Locked offices, private calls, trips I'm not briefed on. I took a deep breath. I have copies of offshore account statements in Dad's name. Accounts not listed in any company disclosures. Kyle stared at me. How did you get those? Mom kept records. She knew Kyle. She knew what Dad was doing years ago. That's impossible. Why wouldn't she have said something? He threatened to take me away from her if she did. To use his money and influence to get full custody. Kyle sat back, visibly shaken. That can't be right. Dad wouldn't. But his voice lacked conviction. I can show you the evidence, I said. Not just Mom's records, but what I've found since. There's a pattern spanning decades. For nearly an hour, Kyle asked increasingly detailed questions. His business degree and role in the company gave him insight I lacked. By the time we finished our third coffee, he seemed convinced. If this is true, the whole company could collapse, he said quietly. Everyone would lose their jobs. The family name would be ruined. People have already been hurt, I countered. Investors who trusted Dad with their money, Mom who was silenced and then abandoned. This isn't about the Mitchell name. It's about right and wrong. Kyle was silent for a long moment. What are you planning to do? I'm building a case with help from a former attorney and a financial journalist. We need access to current company records to complete it. You're asking me to betray my father? His voice was strained. I'm building a case with help from a former attorney and a financial journalist. We need access to current company records to complete it. He flinched at the mention of our mother. I should have visited her. I wanted to, but what? Dad and Patricia said it would only upset her. That seeing me would remind her of everything she'd lost. His eyes filled with genuine remorse. I convinced myself they were right. We parted with Kyle, promising to think about everything we'd discussed. 3 days later, he texted me to meet at the same cafe. This time, he brought a flash drive. Board meeting minutes from the last 5 years, he said, sliding it across the table. And copies of the acquisition due diligence reports. I'm not saying I'm fully on your side yet, but I need to know the truth, too. Over the next 2 weeks, Kyle became an invaluable ally. His access to company information filled crucial gaps in our evidence. We met regularly, always in public places, always careful about who might be watching. With each meeting, Kyle seemed to grow more committed to uncovering the full extent of our father's activities. He shared his own suspicions, pointed out transactions I'd missed, even suggested ways to document the connection between the offshore accounts and company funds. There's a board meeting next month to finalize the acquisition, he told me during our 6th meeting. Dad's planning to push it through before anyone can dig too deeply. If we're going to act, it needs to be before then. We need recorded evidence, I said. Something irrefutable. Kyle nodded. The pre-meeting. It's smaller. Just Dad, Jason, me, and the company council. Dad always speaks more freely there. I could wear a wire. That's incredibly risky. I'm done with the lies, Kyle said with newfound determination. Elizabeth deserved better. So do all the people whose trust Dad violated. Hearing him call my mother by her name instead of your mom felt like a significant shift. For the first time since starting this journey, I felt less alone. We planned carefully. Robert Keegan provided a recording device sophisticated enough to avoid detection. Diana Grant, the journalist who'd agreed to help us, prepared to receive and analyze whatever we captured. The pre-meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. Thursday morning, my phone rang. Diana's number. Cassandra, where are you? Her voice was urgent. At home. Why? Turn on CNBC. Now. I fumbled for the remote. The business news channel was running a breaking story. Mitchell Financial Group announces security breach, possible corporate espionage. My father's face filled the screen as he stood before a podium. It has come to our attention that a disgruntled family member working with a discredited former attorney has been attempting to access private company information and spreading false allegations about our business practices. The room spun around me as I realized what was happening. Mitchell Financial Group has always operated with the highest ethical standards, my father continued smoothly. We are cooperating fully with authorities to address this unfortunate situation. Diana was still on the line. Cassandra, are you there? He knows, I whispered. How does he know? Get out of your apartment, she said urgently. Now, bring whatever evidence you have and come to my office. Use the service entrance I showed you. I was throwing essential items into a bag when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Kyle. Relief flooded through me as I opened the door. Thank God you're here. Dad knows everything. We need to... The words died in my throat as I saw his expression. Cold, calculated. Nothing like the troubled, conscience-stricken brother of our recent meetings. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" Kyle asked, walking past me into the apartment. "That I'd betray my family for a half-sister who's been absent for years?" I was throwing essential items into a bag when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Kyle. Of course I was. Kyle's laugh was eerily similar to our father's. "When you started asking questions, showing up at dinner, Dad knew something was off. After you approached me, we decided to see how far you'd go. We gave you exactly what you wanted. Enough rope to hang yourself," he continued, looking around at my investigation board. Every document I shared was carefully prepared, every confession scripted. The remorse about Mom, the concern about company ethics, all lies. Something flickered in his eyes just for a second. Not all lies. I should have visited Elizabeth. That's the one thing I regret. "And now," what I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad makes me the villain in his press conference while you raid my apartment for evidence. Dad's lawyers are already preparing legal action against you for corporate espionage. The police will be here with a warrant soon." His tone was almost apologetic. "You should never have started this, Cassie. You were outmatched from the beginning." I thought of my mother's courage, of Robert Keegan's warnings, of Diana waiting for me. "Maybe," I said, "but it's not over yet." Kyle shook his head. "It is for you. Dad's going to make sure you never work in marketing again. The story's already spreading. Bitter daughter jealous of family wealth conspires with alcoholic disbarred lawyer to smear successful father. You think I'm doing this out of jealousy? Out of bitterness?" My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. "Mom died alone because your precious family couldn't be bothered to say goodbye. Dad threatened and silenced her for decades. This isn't about money. It's about justice." "You were never one of us," Cassie Kyle said, his voice hardening. "You made that choice when you chose to live with her instead of us. This is just the consequence of that decision." As he turned to leave, he added, "I'd start packing if I were you. Between the legal fees and the damage to your reputation, I doubt you'll be able to afford this place much longer." After he left, I stood frozen for several minutes, the magnitude of the betrayal sinking in. Then I called Diana. "They set me up," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Kyle was working with my father the whole time. They're spinning this as corporate espionage by a jealous daughter." "Are you safe right now?" she asked. "For the moment." "But Kyle said the police would be coming with a warrant. Grab your mother's original evidence and whatever else you can't replace. Meet me at the backup location we discussed. We're not beaten yet." When I returned from meeting Diana, my apartment door was ajar. Inside, everything had been ransacked. My investigation board was stripped bare, my laptop gone, papers scattered across the floor. The framed photo of my mother that had sat on my desk lay shattered on the ground. As I picked it up, removing the broken glass, I noticed something written on the back in unfamiliar handwriting. "Not all family betrays. Do what's right." In that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of my investigation and life, I made a decision. This wasn't just about exposing my father anymore. It was about honoring my mother's courage and reclaiming my own power. They thought they'd broken me. They were wrong. Diana Grant worked from a converted industrial space in South Boston, the kind of neighborhood undergoing rapid gentrification but still rough enough around the edges to offer anonymity. Her office looked more like a war room. Multiple computer screens, walls covered with notes and clippings, secure filing cabinets lining one wall. "The Mitchell family's smear campaign is already in full swing," she said, showing me online articles questioning my mental stability and suggesting I was motivated by inheritance disputes. "Your father has an excellent PR team." "And friends in high places," I added, thinking of Congressman Winters and the other powerful figures I'd seen at family functions, which is exactly why this story matters. Diana was in her 50s with sharp eyes and the intense focus of someone who'd spent decades chasing difficult truths. The wealthy and connected playing by different rules, buying silence, destroying lives with impunity. Robert Keegan joined us, looking more sober and focused than I'd seen him. I've been through the original evidence from Elizabeth's safety deposit box again. The offshore accounts are our strongest angle. They're clearly not disclosed in any company filings. But is it enough? I asked. Kyle said the documents he shared were manipulated. My father's prepared for this. Which is why we need to broaden the investigation, Diana said. If your father did this to your mother, he's done it to others. No one develops these patterns of behavior in isolation. For the next 3 days, we worked around the clock. I moved between cheap motels, paying cash, watching over my shoulder. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from former colleagues and friends who'd seen the news stories, some offering support, others expressing shock at my betrayal of my family. Diana's investigative skills proved invaluable. She tracked down former Mitchell financial employees, several of whom had signed non-disclosure agreements after abrupt departures. Most refused to speak, but 3 agreed to off-the-record conversations. Their stories revealed a pattern of intimidation, ethical corners cut, and suspiciously timed accidents for those who asked too many questions. On day 4, Diana published her first article, a carefully worded piece questioning the timing of Mitchell Financial's security breach announcement and noting the company's history of non-disclosed settlements. She didn't mention me by name or make direct accusations, but the implication was clear: something wasn't adding up in the official narrative. The company's stock dipped slightly in response. A small victory, but it felt significant. My father wouldn't take it lying down. Sure enough, that evening my phone rang. Patricia's number. Against Diana's advice, I answered. "You've made quite a mess," my stepmother said, her voice cold but controlled. "Warren is absolutely livid. I'm surprised you're the one calling. Your father doesn't negotiate with traitors." The edge in her voice was unmistakable. "I, however, am practical. This pointless crusade of yours is damaging the family name. Truth tends to do that when the name is built on lies." "Don't be melodramatic," Patricia sighed. "What do you want, Cassandra? Money? A position in the company? Whatever it is, name it. In exchange, you'll cease this campaign immediately and sign a comprehensive NDA." The offer was so predictable it was almost disappointing. "This isn't about money. Everything is about money, dear. Your mother never understood that either. That's why she died alone in a shabby apartment while I live in a mansion." The casual cruelty stoked my anger. "Is that why none of you visited her, because she didn't value money enough?" "We didn't visit because Warren forbade it," Patricia said matter-of-factly. "He was afraid she might reveal certain indiscretions from their marriage." In her weakened state. "You mean his financial crimes?" Patricia laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. "Your mother was weak. I did what was necessary to secure my future. We're not so different, you and I, just playing on opposite sides." "We are nothing alike," I said, but a chill ran through me at her words. "My offer stands until tomorrow noon. $500,000, and this all goes away. After that, Warren unleashes his full legal team against you." Her voice hardened. "Think carefully. Your mother chose principles over practicality. Look how that ended." I ended the call and immediately recorded everything she'd said. The admission that my father had deliberately kept the family away from my dying mother wasn't proof of financial wrongdoing, but it showed his character. More importantly, I'd managed to record Patricia essentially admitting knowledge of indiscretions my father feared my mother might reveal. When I played the recording for Diana and Robert, their reactions were mixed. "It's morally damning but legally inconclusive," Robert said. "At best, character evidence, but it confirms the pattern Diana countered, and gives us another thread to pull. If Warren Mitchell actively prevented family from visiting Elizabeth out of fear, she'd reveal secrets that supports the coercion narrative." The next day, Diana published a second article focused on the human cost of corporate fraud, featuring testimonials from former employees and investors from similar cases. Again, no direct accusations against my father, but the parallels were unmistakable. This time, the company stock dropped nearly 5%. Board members began receiving calls from concerned major investors. Our momentum was building when my phone rang again. An unknown number. Miss Mitchell. A male voice I didn't recognize. I believe we share some interests regarding your father's business practices. This time, the company stock dropped nearly 5%. Board members began receiving calls from concerned major investors. Our momentum was building when my phone rang again. An unknown number. The caller identified himself as Thomas Reeves, a former business partner of my father's who'd been forced out of a joint venture 10 years earlier. He claimed to have documentation of fraudulent transactions from that period. The documents arrived by courier the next day. They were everything Reeves had promised, and more: loan applications with falsified information, doctored profit projections, evidence of investor funds diverted to personal accounts. It felt too convenient, too easy. After discussing it with Diana and Robert, we agreed to proceed with extreme caution. Reeves would deliver his documentation to a neutral third party, a respected former judge Diana had worked with before. Diana was more measured. It's strong, but still circumstantial in parts. We need someone on the inside to confirm the current state of affairs. As if in answer to our needs, an unmarked package arrived at Diana's office that afternoon. Inside was a USB drive containing copies of the exact documents Kyle had taken from my apartment. But these were the originals, not the manipulated versions he'd initially shared with me. A simple note accompanied them: "Not all family betrays. Do what's right." The handwriting matched the note I'd found on my mother's photograph. Someone in the family was helping us, but who? Not Kyle, whose betrayal still stung. Jason seemed unlikely given his total loyalty to our father. Patricia was obviously out. Could it be my father's company counsel? A board member with access to the files? We couldn't be sure, but the evidence was legitimate and powerful. Diana's third article was the most direct yet. While still careful to present everything as alleged and under investigation, she laid out specific examples of discrepancies between Mitchell Financial's public filings and their actual activities supported by redacted documents. The company stock plummeted 15%. Trading was temporarily halted. Business news channels picked up the story, with analysts debating whether the Mitchell acquisition deal would collapse. My father finally responded personally, giving an interview to a friendly financial news program where he dismissed the allegations as a coordinated attack by competitors and bitter former associates. He announced an internal audit to reaffirm what we already know: that Mitchell Financial operates with complete transparency and integrity. What he didn't mention was that the Singapore Acquisition Group had put their deal on hold pending investigation, or that several major clients had begun quietly moving their funds elsewhere. We were making progress, but time was running out. My father was scheduling an emergency board meeting to approve the accelerated sale of the company to a different buyer, a private equity firm known for asset-stripping acquisitions before dissolving them, which would effectively bury the evidence of wrongdoing. "We need to be at that board meeting," Diana said. "Present everything we have directly to the board members who have legal liability if they approve a fraudulent sale. How I'm persona non grata, Robert, is disbarred, and you're a journalist they'd never allow in the room." "We need an insider," Robert agreed. "Someone with legitimate access who's willing to help us." The question hung in the air. Who was our anonymous ally? That night, as I returned to my latest motel hideout, a car pulled alongside me in the parking lot. The window rolled down to reveal a face I hadn't expected to see again: Kyle. My hand moved to the pepper spray in my pocket. "Haven't you done enough damage?" "I deserve that," he said, looking genuinely remorseful. "But I'm not here to hurt you. I'm your anonymous source." I stared at him in disbelief. "You expect me to believe that after you betrayed me to Dad?" "I did betray you," he admitted. "I told Dad everything when you first approached me. But then I started looking into what you'd shared. Really looking, not just dismissing it. The offshore accounts, the missing investor funds. It's all true, isn't it?" "You know it is." Kyle's shoulders slumped. "I've been sending you the real documents, copying them before Dad's team could alter or destroy them. The board meeting is tomorrow. Dad's going to try to push through the sale to Blackwater Capital. Once that happens, the company gets broken apart, the records scattered or destroyed. Why should I trust you now? Because Mom deserved better, he said quietly. Your mom, Elizabeth. She was always kind to me, even when Patricia talked about her like she was nothing. He met my eyes. And because I can get you into that board meeting, the moment of truth had arrived. Could I trust the brother who had betrayed me once already, or was this another elaborate trap? Diana and Robert were divided when I called them. Robert urged extreme caution. Diana saw the opportunity as too valuable to pass up. If we're ever going to expose the truth, this is our chance, she argued. The entire board in one room with all the evidence presented before they can be prepared for it. In the end, the decision was mine. Looking at Kyle, seeing the conflict in his eyes, remembering the boy who'd once sent me birthday cards, even when the rest of the family had written me off, I made my choice. Tell me your plan, I said. The next morning, I stood outside Mitchell Financial headquarters, my heart pounding as I prepared to confront my father and expose decades of deceit, or walk into a trap that could destroy what remained of my life. Mitchell Financial Group occupied the top 8 floors of a gleaming tower in Boston's financial district. I hadn't been inside since an awkward bring your daughter to work day when I was 12. Now I approached the security desk wearing a conservative business suit, my hair pulled back, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Cassandra Mitchell for the board meeting, I said, following Kyle's instructions precisely. My brother Kyle should have added me to the list. The guard checked his computer, then nodded. Yes, Miss Mitchell. 32nd floor main boardroom. He handed me a visitor badge. Mr. Mitchell asked that you go directly up. In the elevator, my stomach churned with anxiety. Our plan relied on precise timing. Diana would be waiting outside with the complete evidence package. Robert had prepared a concise legal brief outlining the potential violations. Kyle had arranged for me to speak at the beginning of the meeting before the formal agenda began. If anything went wrong, if my father had anticipated this move and set a trap, I'd be walking into a room of powerful enemies with no backup. The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area where Kyle waited, looking tense but determined. The board members are already seated, he whispered as he led me down a hallway. Dad's running late. He's in his office with Jason and Patricia. This is our chance to present everything before he arrives. And if he gets there before I've finished. Kyle's expression was grim. Then we improvise. The Mitchell Financial boardroom was imposing. A long mahogany table surrounded by leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering panoramic views of Boston Harbor. 10 people sat around the table, most in their 60s or older, all exuding the comfortable authority of the extremely wealthy. Conversation halted abruptly when I entered. Several board members frowned in recognition. Ladies and gentlemen, Kyle said, formally, my sister Cassandra has requested a few minutes to address the board before we begin the formal agenda. Is this appropriate? Asked a white-haired man at the far end of the table, given the allegations currently circulating. Those allegations are precisely why I'm here, I said, stepping forward. Before you vote on the Blackwater acquisition, you deserve to know exactly what you're selling. I distributed folders containing key documents from our investigation. These materials demonstrate a pattern of financial misconduct spanning 2 decades. Embezzlement of investor funds, falsified financial statements, undisclosed offshore accounts. A murmur ran through the room as board members began reviewing the contents. Miss Mitchell, said a woman wearing an expression of practiced skepticism, these are serious accusations. What evidence? The boardroom door burst open. My father stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. Behind him loomed Jason, and behind Jason Patricia, her eyes narrowed to slits. What the hell is this? My father demanded, striding into the room. This person has no authorization to be here. Security! I invited her, Kyle said, stepping between us. The board deserves to hear what she has to say before voting. The board, my father snarled, doesn't take direction from a junior executive who's clearly been manipulated by his estranged sister. I invited her, Kyle said, stepping between us. The board deserves to hear what she has to say before voting. It's fabricated, my father interrupted, part of a coordinated smear campaign by my daughter who has been mentally unstable since her mother's death. That's not true, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Everything in those folders is documented, verifiable fact. Multiple sources, independent verification. Sources like Robert Keegan. My father laughed coldly. A disbarred alcoholic with a personal vendetta against me. Or anonymous whistleblowers who won't put their names to these absurd claims. The room's atmosphere was shifting. I could feel the board members' initial concern giving way to uncertainty. My father was masterful at controlling narratives, at making his reality the only acceptable one. The offshore accounts exist, I pressed on. The transactions are documented. The pattern my father cut in is one of a daughter who chose her mother over her father in a divorce, who resented the family's success while rejecting its opportunities, and who now seeks revenge through baseless allegations. He turned to the board. I apologize for this disruption. My daughter has been troubled since Elizabeth's passing. We've tried to help her, but she's refused all support. The practiced concern in his voice made my blood boil. This was how he'd always operated. Rewriting history, casting himself as the reasonable party, his opponents as irrational or unstable. Is that why you prevented the family from visiting my mother on her deathbed? I asked loud enough for everyone to hear. Because you were trying to help. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, the first crack in his armor. Or was it because you were afraid she might reveal what she knew about your business practices, about how you threatened to take me away from her if she exposed your crimes? That's enough, Jason interjected. This is a business meeting, not family therapy. It's relevant, I insisted, because it establishes a pattern of coercion and silencing that extends to his business dealings. The boardroom door opened again. Diana Grant walked in, followed by security guards trying unsuccessfully to stop her. I apologize for the interruption, she said smoothly, but I believe this is relevant to your discussions. She distributed additional folders. Sworn affidavits from former Mitchell financial employees detailing specific instances of financial misconduct they witnessed. My father's face darkened. This is a private meeting. You have no right. The press has every right to report on matters of public interest, Diana replied calmly, particularly when they involve potential securities fraud affecting hundreds of investors. The atmosphere in the room shifted again. Board members exchanged concerned glances as they reviewed the new materials. Warren said the white-haired man these allegations require a response. Concrete, specific answers, not general denials. My father's expression hardened into something ugly. This is a coordinated attack. My daughter has clearly colluded with this so-called journalist to create a sensationalist story for personal gain. That's not true, Kyle said, his voice stronger now. I've independently verified key elements of these allegations. The offshore accounts exist. The discrepancies in our financial reporting are real. The shock on my father's face at Kyle's betrayal quickly gave way to cold fury. You too. After everything I've done for you. This isn't about loyalty, Kyle replied. It's about the truth. The truth, Jason stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. The truth is that you're throwing away your inheritance to side with a half-sister who's barely been part of this family. Elizabeth raised me to believe that integrity matters more than money, I said quietly. A lesson the rest of you never learned. Patricia, who had been watching the scene unfold with calculating eyes, suddenly stepped forward. Perhaps we should consider the possibility that there have been irregularities. All heads turned to her in surprise. Patricia, my father warned. All heads turned to her in surprise. All heads turned to her in surprise. In fact, Patricia continued smoothly. I have documented several instances where investor funds were diverted to these accounts without proper disclosure or authorization. The room erupted in overlapping voices. Board members demanded explanations. My father attempted to regain control of the narrative, but the damage was done. I move that we suspend this acquisition vote pending a full independent investigation, said the white-haired man. and that we temporarily relieve Warren Mitchell of his duties as CEO until this matter is resolved. I second the motion, said the skeptical woman who had questioned me earlier. This is absurd, my father shouted. You can't. We can and we will, replied the white-haired man. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. These allegations are too serious to ignore. The vote was quick and decisive. My father was suspended pending investigation. The acquisition was put on hold. Security was instructed to secure all company records and restrict access to financial systems. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, my father pushed past Kyle to confront me directly. You think this is a victory? He hissed, his face inches from mine. You have no idea what you've done. I made this company. I control this company. When this witch hunt is over and I'm vindicated, I will destroy you so thoroughly you'll wish you'd never been born. I met his gaze without flinching. You didn't just abandon Mom on her deathbed. You abandoned the truth, your integrity, and your humanity. You can threaten me all you want, but you can't change the facts. And you can't silence me the way you silenced her. Something shifted in his eyes then. Perhaps the first glimmer of recognition that his carefully constructed world was truly crumbling. As security arrived to escort him from the building, a humiliation I took no pleasure in witnessing, Patricia approached me. Don't mistake my actions for alliance with you, she said coldly. I'm merely protecting my own interests. Warren's ship is sinking and I have no intention of going down with it. I never expected loyalty from you, I replied, just as my mother never received any. Outside the building, I stood with Kyle, Diana, and Robert, watching as news vans began to arrive, alerted by Diana's colleagues to the unfolding story. It's not over, Robert cautioned. Men like your father don't go down easily. There will be counter-allegations, legal maneuvers, attempts to discredit everyone involved. But the truth is finally out there, I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. After all these years, Mom's silence has been broken. Kyle touched my arm awkwardly. I'm sorry for my part in all this. For the betrayal, for not seeing the truth sooner. I studied my half-brother's face, seeing genuine remorse there. You made the right choice in the end. That's what matters. As reporters began approaching, Diana stepped forward to handle them with practiced ease. Robert slipped away uncomfortable with the attention. Kyle and I stood together, an unlikely alliance formed from the wreckage of family secrets. What happens now? Kyle asked quietly. I thought of my mother. Her courage, her sacrifice, her unwavering moral compass. Now we rebuild. On a foundation of truth this time. 6 months passed like a hurricane of depositions, legal proceedings, and media scrutiny. The Mitchell Financial Group scandal made headlines for weeks, then settled into the background hum of business news as investigators methodically built their case. My father faced multiple criminal charges for securities, fraud, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice. His legal team fought viciously, but each motion to dismiss was denied as evidence continued to mount against him. Trial was set for the following spring. The company itself underwent a complete restructuring under new leadership. Many employees lost jobs as departments were consolidated, though the board made efforts to protect lower-level staff who had no involvement in the fraudulent activities. My relationship with Kyle evolved cautiously. The betrayal had left deep scars, but his courage in the final confrontation earned him a second chance. We met weekly for coffee, carefully rebuilding trust as we navigated the aftermath together. Jason refused all contact, blaming me entirely for the family's downfall. Last I heard, he had moved to Europe using money my father had hidden abroad to maintain his lifestyle while distancing himself from the scandal. Patricia, true to form, negotiated a cooperation agreement with prosecutors in exchange for immunity. She filed for divorce within weeks of my father's arrest and was reportedly dating a retired hedge fund manager with a house in the Hamptons. On a crisp autumn morning, I visited my mother's grave for the first time since the scandal broke. The simple headstone read Elizabeth Mitchell, beloved teacher and mother, with her favorite Emily Dickinson quote, "Beneath tell all the truth, but tell it slant." I laid fresh flowers and sat on the small bench nearby. "We did it, Mom," I said quietly. "The truth is out. Dad's facing justice. It's not perfect, but it's happening." The wind rustled through nearby trees, a peaceful sound so different from the chaos of recent months. After my father's arrest, I'd received calls and letters from people whose lives had been touched by my mother. Former students, colleagues, neighbors. They shared stories of her kindness, her quiet strength, her unwavering moral compass. Each story healed something in me that had been broken by years of family rejection. Robert Keegan had maintained his sobriety throughout the ordeal, gradually rebuilding his life and professional reputation. He'd been approached about writing a book on corporate fraud, focusing on the psychological patterns of executives who crossed ethical lines. "Your mother would be proud of you," he told me during our last meeting. "Not just for exposing Warren, but for how you've handled everything since, with dignity and without vindictiveness." Diana Grant won a prestigious journalism award for her investigation. The citation praised her methodical dismantling of corporate deception and unwavering commitment to public interest reporting in an era of diminishing investigative resources. As for me, I used a portion of the settlement money from the civil case against my father to establish a scholarship foundation in my mother's name. The Elizabeth Mitchell Educational Trust provided support for single parents pursuing higher education, a fitting tribute to a woman who had valued learning above wealth. The marketing firm where I'd worked couldn't bring themselves to rehire me. Too controversial, they said. But a competing agency recognized the value of my newly public reputation for integrity and offered me a senior first position heading their ethics in advertising initiative. Life had found a new rhythm. Different, unexpected, but with its own sense of purpose. As I sat by my mother's grave, I opened my bag and removed the final page of her letter, a page I'd kept separate, returning to it in moments of doubt or difficulty. "My dearest Cassandra," it read, "if you're reading this final page, you've likely already walked a difficult path. Remember that forgiveness isn't for those who hurt us, it's for ourselves. It releases us from the prison of bitterness. This doesn't mean excusing wrongdoing or abandoning justice. It means freeing your heart from the weight of hatred. I never wanted revenge against your father. I wanted truth. I wanted justice. Most of all, I wanted you to be free to live your life unburdened by secrets. Love yourself as fiercely as I have loved you. Find joy in the life you build from these ashes. Until we meet again, all my love, Mom." Tears blurred my vision as I carefully folded the letter and returned it to my bag. The journey wasn't over. My father's trial lay ahead, along with whatever aftermath would follow. But for the first time since receiving that envelope after the funeral, I felt true peace. In the end, Mom never wanted revenge. She wanted truth and justice. And somehow, in honoring her final wish, I found something I thought I'd lost forever: peace. If you've ever had to stand up for truth against powerful opposition or navigate complicated family relationships, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. This journey has taught me how many people silently carry similar burdens, and sharing our experiences helps us all feel less alone. Please like this video if anything in my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes standing for the truth, however painful, is the only path to healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that even in our darkest moments, courage and integrity can light the way forward.